Hello, hello, hello. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Brain Buzz with Mike. I'm your brain coach, Mike Harrigan, coming to you live from the Braining Center in Leesburg, Virginia. Today we have a very important topic. It has to do with something that affects every one of us all the time. Some of us more than others, but every one of us is affected by this all the time. Okay, and it has to do with multitasking and whether or not multitasking is good or bad. Okay, so first, for the purpose of this discussion, we need to define what we mean by multitasking. There are a number of different definitions. In fact, some neuroscientists say that you actually can't multitask. There's no such thing. You can't be focusing on two things at once. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to define multitasking as simultaneously working on two or more things at the same time, simultaneously, that require conscious thought for us to be aware of what we're doing. So you're trying to do two things at the same time, both of which require our conscious attention, okay? And so it's something that we all do all the time. And as I said, it's things like checking your email while you're having a discussion with somebody, or returning texts while you're in a meeting, or while you're trying to do your bills, or you're trying to do your bills at the same time you're working on some other project back and forth, right? And so that's multitasking, or what we, for this purpose, we're calling multitasking. And the question is that good or bad? Does that help us become more productive and save time and get more done and be more efficient and help with our relationships and our communication skills? Or does it hurt us? All right, so let's dig in a little bit. First, I'm going to start by giving a little bit of a demonstration here, something we do quite a bit here at the Braining Center, to kind of get a point across about the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious or unconscious, okay? So we really have two ways to process information generally. One is consciously, something we're aware of and we're cognizantly working on, aware of it. And the other is on a subconscious, unconscious level, okay? So this demonstration should help with that. So whether you do it now or later, what I want you to do is you have your hands up in front of you with the backs facing out and point your pinky to your thumb, all right? Then go and switch. Now have the other pinky pointing to the other thumb. Now switch back again and back again and back again and back again, and then keep doing it. Now try to do that while you're having a conversation or doing calculations or whatever it might be. So you're switching back and forth while you're able to think of something consciously, okay? When I first tried to do that, I could not do it. It's very, very difficult. Everyone I've shown this to tries to do it. They can't do it at first. So here's what's happening. You, as I said, you can only consciously think of one thing at a time. It's a scientifically validated, proven fact. You can't be at the same moment thinking about two things at once. So when you're doing this, and since this is not something that is totally natural and automatic, what you're doing is you're looking at your hands when you first learn to do this. You look at your hands and you have to consciously look at it and switch back and forth. So you look at your thumb, this thumb's going to come down, this pinky's going to come out. I'm thinking about that. Now I'm going to switch over. I'm going to think about this pinky coming in and this thumb coming out. Now I'm going to switch back again and think about the thumb going down and pinky out, think about the pinky and thumb out. And I'm consciously thinking about what's going on. And I'm switching back and forth as quickly as I can, and then slowly I'm speeding up, and more I'm speeding up, but I'm still consciously thinking about it and switching from one hand to the other as I think, right? And eventually what happens is I've taken advantage of neuroplasticity. There are two elements of neuroplasticity, which I'll explain in a moment. But eventually what happens is I've taken advantage of those two elements of neuroplasticity and relegated this task to my subconscious, unconscious processing system. So I no longer have to process it consciously. I can be doing it automatically. So here's the deal. Consciously, we can only think of one thing at a time. Our subconscious, unconscious system is processing billions of bits of information all of the time. It's regulating our heart rate, our blood pressure, our temperature. It's controlling what I'm doing with my hands as I'm not even aware of it, my facial expressions. It's controlling many, many things all the time that I'm not consciously aware of. So it's a whole separate way to process information, right? Other than our conscious system, right? And so when you're doing this, you're giving information to your brain, to the subconscious, unconscious brain about what you're trying to do. To leverage neuroplasticity, I said there are two key elements. We talked about this in earlier discussions. The two elements that leverage neuroplasticity are data and priority. Neuroplasticity is our ability to change our brains, our ability to get our brains rewired or get the systems working in a different way than they were before, right? And we can do that. So, but what we need to do in order to do that is we need to give data to the brain, and that data can be through our eyes, our ears, our noses, our mouths, our limbs, touch. We can get data into the brain in many, many ways, but then we also need to prioritize that data. We need to make sure that this subconscious system that's processing billions of bits of information all the time pays attention to this. And we can do that in various ways. In this case, we're doing it through repetition and focus. And by giving the data, showing the subconscious what we're trying to do with the finger, the thumb, and the pinky, and doing it over and over until we get it down, we're giving the data and the priority to the system to take that over. So that is vital, right? So that's the first point of understanding as we talk about this. But how does that relate to multitasking, you're asking, right? Well, it does. It's very important for multitasking. And here's why we'll get that in a minute. But first, I'm going to do another demonstration for you. It's something you can do at home later, but I'm going to ask you to do it, and I'm just going to walk through what you would do. What I'm going to ask you to do is write down one sentence, and that sentence is, does multitasking work? And I want you to write it letter by letter, DOES, right? Each letter of does multitasking work. When you finish that, I want you to write a number under each of those letters. So under the first letter D, you write 1. Under the O, 2. Under the E of does, 3. Under the S, 4, and so on. So each letter in that sentence has a number underneath it, right? And I want you to, when you do this, I want you to start with a timer. I want you to time yourself. See how long it takes to write the sentence, and then write a letter under each one, a number under each one of those letters. Then I want you to go back and do the exact same thing and time it again, only this time, with each letter that you write the corresponding number. So when you write the D of does, write 1 underneath it. The O, 2. E, 3. S, 4. And go back and forth and write each letter of does multitasking work and each number and time that. And what you're going to find is it takes a lot longer to do it when you're switching back and forth between letter and number. And that's because your conscious mind can only be thinking about one thing at a time. And when you switch from some type of task to a completely different type of task, you have to stop. And that takes time, and you have to refocus, and then you have to change. And so by going back and forth between just writing a sentence and writing numbers, you're going back and forth many times, you're stopping and shifting many, many times, wasting a lot of time. So that's a great example to just demonstrate what happens when you try multitasking in general. So when you're going, and the same holds true, when you try and go and multitask, doing multiple things at one time, your brain is playing basically a game of red light, green light. It's stopping, starting, stopping, starting, and wasting time. And there have been numerous studies about this. It's irrefutable. So I'm just going to quote a couple things from a couple lines from a couple of studies. One very respected study, the result was that multitasking, quoting this, multitasking takes as much as 40% more time than focusing on one task at a time. And even more than that, more than 40% longer for very complex tasks, for more complex tasks. So what they're saying is if you had two things that might take you an hour to do if you do them separately, if you try to do them together, it's going to take an hour and 40 times 24 minutes, right? It's going to take you a little bit, about 40% longer. And if they're complicated tasks, it's going to take even longer than that. A second study, which is even worse, worse news, it's a very respected Stanford University study, showed that those people that consider themselves really good multitaskers, people that think, oh, I'm really good at this, that doesn't really apply to me. They found those people, relative to people who didn't consider themselves to be great multitaskers, that those people had made more mistakes when they tried to multitask than the other people. They remembered fewer details about what they were doing, and they took longer to complete those tasks. So they were doing these two things together to save time. It took longer, they made more mistakes, and they didn't remember as much about what they were doing. So understanding that multitasking is not productive, understanding that it really does hurt you, is going to help you in trying to fight this urge to do it, right? And so how do we leverage this knowledge, this understanding about how the brain works and what multitasking, the detrimental effects of multitasking? So here's a few things we can do. First of all, organize your time. Set time aside for each type of thing that you're doing. So if you're doing, you want to go through emails each day, set time aside, whether it's the last 10 minutes of every hour or twice a day, whatever it is, that's when you go through your emails. Same thing for when you're going to return phone calls or make phone calls or return texts. And the same thing if you do bills or paperwork, whatever it is, whatever you need to work on in a day, set time aside for it and work on that only. Second thing, isolate yourself. Remove the potential for distractions that might take your attention away and forcing that red light, green light to take place in your brain. So if you're working in an office with many people, kind of turn so you're not necessarily facing right at people where they're more likely to engage you in conversation sporadically. Wear headphones or close your door if you have a door to your office. Wear headphones or close your door so that it's obvious to other people that you're busy and that you're not to be disturbed at that moment, right? And then the other thing you can do is you can schedule meeting times. If you have someone that you meet with regularly throughout the day or people that you meet with regularly, schedule meeting times with them to go over this information so you're not as likely to go back and forth with each other and throw each other's schedules off, right? And then the last thing, which is vitally important, especially this day and age, really, really critical, put the screens away. If you're doing a task that does not require you to be on your computer or on your phone, turn it off, turn it over, put it in the other room, whatever it takes, get it away from you so that distraction is not there so you can focus on the specific task that you're doing, get it done better, get it done quicker, and then you can go back and return those messages if that's what it is. So here's a recap, okay? Recap of this discussion. First thing, multitasking is bad. I don't care who you are, what you think, you are not being more efficient by doing it. It is hurting you. Second thing, how can you remedy it? Do one thing at a time. Don't try to do multiple things at once. Close everything off while you're doing it so that there's no distractions. Finish that one thing before you move on to something else, and then reward yourself. Feel prideful in what you've accomplished when you do that. Maybe go get a treat or do something, then move on to the next task. And you'll find that you're much more efficient in doing that. You'll find that you save time, you're working faster and getting more done. Your work is better, and you're staying in the moment. You're practicing staying in the moment because that's exactly what you're doing. And by doing that, you'll find you may even help your own personal relationships or business relationships because you're able to focus more on that person that you're talking with and engage and stay in the moment better because you're not as used to being distracted by devices or external influences, okay? So that's our recap for today. I hope that is helpful to you. I know it's really been helpful for me. I've been trying to work on this quite a bit, especially lately. And I've found that it is very, very helpful and very, very productive. So I hope it's helpful for you. If you have any questions, as usual, reach out to me at brainingcenter@headstrong1.com. That's brainingcenter@headstrong1.com. And as always, remember, the brain and body are one unit. They're totally connected. Whatever you do to one affects the other. If you train one, you're helping the other. So do that as much as you can. Engage your brain and body as much as you can in all the things you do in a positive way. Thanks again for listening. Until next Tuesday, have an awesome week.